Well, good afternoon. My name is Scott Anderson, and I'm President and CEO of Zions Bank. And it's my honor to welcome all of you to our February Community Speaker Series honoring Black History Month. This year, Zions Bank celebrates 150 years in business. And in honor of this significant milestone in our history, our Zions Community Speaker Series will center around the theme of honoring our history, investing in our future. While Black History Month is widely celebrated every year in February, I believe that Black history is a part of American history that we haven't talked about enough. And as a part of American history, we need to talk about more. And we need to share more of its stories. And we need to celebrate it all year round. So I encourage you to support and invest in Black-owned businesses, to educate yourself by studying the stories of Black leaders in our communities, and to seek out opportunities to deepen your understanding of the valuable contributions members of the Black community have made to our families, our communities, and our economy. And I recommend to you all this book, Black Utah, Stories from a Thriving Community, put out by the Utah Black Chamber and compiled by James Jackson III. It's a wonderful book of stories of Black pioneers and leaders in Utah. Today, we are honored to feature as part of our speaker series an inspiring and accomplished panel of individuals who are leading out in the arts, education, government, business, and entrepreneurship. I look forward to hearing their comments and to learning more about the history behind their work, their careers, and their communities, and how their journey has made our stories possible, and how they have paved the way to help us invest in our future. Today's community speakers include Maui Boner, co-founder and director of Lift Up Voices and producer and director of the movie His Name is Green Flake. Cherie Buckner Webb, former state senator in the Idaho State Legislature, and a founder and principal of Sojourner Coaching. Dion L. Henderson, CEO and managing partner of Miss Essie's Southern Barbecue. And Malijah Garfield, director of the Black Cultural Center at the University of Utah, and Cleopatra Balford, Economic Development Program Manager for Salt Lake County. I want to thank our guest speakers for sharing their personal stories, perspectives, and experiences with us today. I also want to thank our One Zions team, who's responsible for organizing and producing today's event. And thanks to all of you for joining in and taking the time to Zoom in with us to celebrate Black History Month. As I conclude my introduction, I want to remind everyone that building a culture of inclusion begins with us, it begins with me, and it begins with you. So with no further ado, I'd like to turn the time over to Sulang Pinoke, our Senior Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Sulang.
Thank you so much, Scott, for that warm welcome. Your leadership and support means so much to all of us and to our community. As Scott mentioned, Zions Bank celebrates 150 years in business this year. That is truly a remarkable feat. And in honor of this moment in our institution's history, we thought we would use this platform to showcase the stories and history of community leaders and organizations across our footprint, and invite them to share their visions for our future. We are honored to hear from such dedicated community leaders in today's Community Speaker Series, honoring our history, investing in our future. With no further ado, I'd like to introduce our speakers. Please join me in welcoming Maui Boner, co-founder and director of Lift Up Voices and producer and director of the film His Name is Green Flake. Cherie Buckner Webb, former state senator in the Idaho State Legislature and founder and principal of Sojourner Coaching. Malijah Garfield, director of the Black Cultural Center at the University of Utah. Dion Henderson, CEO and managing partner of Miss Essie's Southern Barbecue, among many other business and entrepreneurial endeavors. And Cleopatra Balfour, Economic Development Program Manager for Salt Lake County. I want to thank each of our guests for being here with us today. We're going to start today's conversation with hearing stories outlining the history of their work each of their guests is leading in our communities. And then we'll explore the many ways in which they are investing in the future of our communities and our economy. Let's start with Mally Bonner Jr. Now, Mally is one of those people whose reputation precedes himself. I had heard of Mally for years before we actually met, and we became great friends over the past couple of years. We actually met in LA when I was dropping off my daughter to college at UCLA, and the purpose of our meeting was to explore ways in which we could support the work he is doing in Utah's community. I'm also his mother's biggest fan, Deborah Bonner. You may have heard of her. She leads the Deborah Bonner Unity Gospel Choir, and I'll just say I cry every time I have the honor of being in the presence of their music. Truly, truly inspired. Mally is one of the most humble human beings I've ever known, and the impact he's had in our community has been significant. So, Mally, as we reflect upon the history of Zion's Bank, the bank's history is very much aligned with the history showcased in your first feature film, His Name is Green Flake. Share with us your inspiration behind making this film, and for those of us who have not seen it yet, who is Green Flake and why is his story so significant to Utah's history?
Yes, thank you so much. And I just have to say, you you might be my mother's second biggest fan. I'm number one.
We're in competition
there. So Green Flake, when I learned about his story, this is just 4 short years ago, I learned about this young 19-year-old enslaved young man who was also a member of the early church that trekked across country. And as this 19-year-old, he was charged with being as a part of the Vanguard company. Some of you may have heard of that, the advance team that led on that trek. And Green Flake drove that first wagon. So when you think of all of these pioneers that sacrificed so much to come into this valley, Green Flake driving that first wagon was a big part of that. And so after learning that, and I learned that at a celebration that the church put on, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the same church that Green Flake was a part of, they put an event on highlighting some of the Black pioneers. And when I learned about that, I quickly started writing all of my thoughts and education I was learning as I was meeting with historians. And we ended up filming 3 short months after I wrote the screenplay. And so we shot that film in Ogden. And it was an incredible experience of making the film. And I wanted to make the film because I realized that some of the Black history, like Scott was pointing out, we just don't know. And we want to learn more. All of us, we want to learn more. And I'm constantly learning more about my own people, which is just incredible. And the contributions, especially in Utah. So Green Flake, he stayed in Utah, also went to Idaho and came back and forth, but he became a pillar of the community. He would speak at multiple Pioneer Day celebrations where they would commemorate those early pioneers in 1847. So it was a wonderful experience making that film.
And recognizing Brigham Young as the founder of Zion's Bank, we talk about the days of 47 all the time, but now knowing Green Flake was one of the Black pioneers that came across the plains with the pioneers in the days of 47, such a critical component and significant piece of our history that thanks to you and this film, more people in our community are going to know about and can share those stories. In addition to that, you played a leading role in the fundraising, the designing and revealing of the memorial that now stands at This Is the Place Monument, depicting Green Flake and other Black pioneers who were part of the famous pioneer trek across the plains in 1847. Why is creating memorials like this one, honoring the history of Green Flake, his family, and other Black pioneers so important?
Well, I will say that, those efforts in creating that memorial, it would have been just a dream or an idea had Zion's Bank not come on so early, and Kem Gardner and other people in the community that learned about this history as well and were like, yes, what can we do to support it? So I just want to thank Zion's Bank for coming on and being a big part of making that happen at This Is the Place Heritage Park. And the reason why it's so important is the visual representation. A lot of times what we see is what we believe. So for me, I didn't know that there were early Black pioneers in that trek. And many of you who are listening in probably didn't know that because you haven't seen the pictures or sculptures highlighting that history. And so having art help tell the story of our history is a big component, especially for our children, the younger generation. So now I can take my children to a place and say, there are people that look like you that did impossible things, and you can overcome anything if they can overcome what they did.
I love that so much. And it is the most beautiful memorial. Can you share a little bit about the gathering that was hosted there when you revealed the memorial? I was very honored to be there in the presence of our community. And that was probably one of the most, just amazing, life-changing experiences that I've personally ever had. I don't know if any of you were there as well. Cleopatra, I know you were there. Can you share with us a little bit about that gathering?
Absolutely. I mean, Sui Lang, I mean, like you said, you were there. It was, gosh, there was a spirit there that I'd never felt before. You know, there was thousands that were there. You know, we thought we'd get 200 chairs. Well, we should probably up it to 1,000 chairs. A good thing we did get as many chairs as we did, because there was an overflow that took over the whole courtyard. And it was people from everywhere, every walk of life, different races, ages, cultures, religions. It was a fantastic gathering. The governor spoke at it, which was incredible. He was an incredible supporter of this monument, as well as leaders from the church and other faiths, as well as the NAACP and AACP. It was just it was fascinating to know, because what we didn't know is how, as we talk about this history, especially enslavement, how is it going to be received? Is it going to be contentious? And this whole journey has been nothing but healing and unifying for all of us. There's been no negative press about it. There was no negative words said. It was just a beautiful event where people came together and were able to educate one another in it and honor those who had been forgotten in history.
Wow, that is such a beautiful recap. And to your point, preserving our history, learning of our history is a healing process. So thank you so much for the valuable contributions you bring to our community. I want to jump up to Idaho. Cherie Buckner-Webb has become one of my new favorite friends in Boise. I am also her biggest fan, and I'm so excited to finally meet you in person. And this May, when I come out for a couple of community events the bank is hosting in Boise. Your family dates back 5 generations in Idaho, and your career has been a reflection of that. Strong and deep investments in your community, from the work you've done through public service on Capitol Hill, serving as a state senator in the Idaho State Legislature for 12 years. That's a significant stint of time. To the significant investments you have made in Idaho's business community through your coaching and consulting firm, Sojourner Coaching. And I want to hear more about the title of your firm. So tell us more about your family history, what brought them to Idaho, what has kept them there, and how that history has inspired the work you've done in the public and private sector.
Thank you. Glad to be with you today. One of the things that's wonderful, there were few Black people as we started out here. And so it seemed like the first 3 or 4 Black people and families that came, we got married and we stayed and we went through. And can't wait to talk to Mr. Bonner about Green Flake, because one of the families that came was with the Western migration of it was a cousin's cousin. And that came across with him, and I can't wait to talk to them. There's only a couple of that family member left, to have them come down to make sure they're older now to see the monument. It's just I was making copious notes as you were speaking, and I didn't know what had happened. One of the families came from Arkansas. My mother's family came from Arkansas. It was right on the precipice, or right on the heels of one of the largest mass lynchings, not far from the town in which they lived, and it drove one sister to move to Idaho. Her husband was working for the railroad, and she'd never heard of Idaho, but she knew that she had to get out to find a way for the rest of them. While she was in Pocatello, Idaho, she met another Black man who didn't have a wife or a family. And so she immediately wrote to her sister and said, "You got to come down. I got a live one. We could have 2 families down here." And lo and behold, all of our family, ultimately my mother's family, settled in Idaho. Took a while, but they all got there. They had 8 kids, and that was pretty cool. My father's family, his father was living in the Midwest. I'm trying to think where he's from. But anyway, they ultimately came from St. Louis. He's from St. Louis, and he went to Pueblo, Colorado to found a church, because God was whispering in his ear. And I remember hearing this all my life. He whispered in his ear, "Go to Pueblo, Colorado." And then ultimately, after he founded a church there, he came to Idaho to do the same thing. I found the paperwork when they bought a house off of one of our most prestigious roadways, which is Warm Springs Avenue. How this happened, I think that a number of Black folks supported the people on the avenue. in 1910, he bought a home. I still own that home and I've kept it up. It's a really wonderful home, but that's how he came to found a church. So my mother met my dad, was a love connection, and we've been here for many generations. On the other side of the family, another side of the family, my grandpa Buckner, the one that my grandmother Buckner married, his family had 8 children and moved from, some of them were from Wewoka, Illinois, and let's see where else. And anyway, they came one by one because they were so amazed that Black people could own property. They could homestead. They could have property that was theirs forever, ostensibly, by coming to Idaho. So one by one, they came, and that's how we all came here. And we all came together under that Black church, the St. Paul Black Baptist Church, which my great-grandfather found, great-grandfather and his father. So that's where the 5th generation comes from, founded. Ultimately, we all worship there. I married my husband there. My sister married her husband, all those kinds of things. We stayed there for a long time. Many of us went away and we came back to Idaho. Surprised that we were so drawn to come back to Idaho, but love it very much. And ultimately, that little church that they built on Broadway Avenue went through a few generations, and it was time that St. Paul had outgrown the church and was going to move to buy another facility. And my grandmother Buckner, her father and grandfather is the one that built it, could really work a girl. Cherie, don't let him sell that church. Your grandpa built that church. You can't do that. Oh, Lord, don't let it go. Long story short, we ultimately made it the Idaho Black History Museum. We got the building donated to us, moved it down the road, and it sat for a long time until we raised the money. Mr. Bonner, you don't know how impressed I am that you're able to do all the things you are, because sometimes you have to do a lot of educating before you can get that kind of participation. But I will tell you that my city, my neighbors, strangers on the street, supported us in a very well. We have in a very big way. We have a Black History Museum sitting in the oldest park in Boise, which is Julia Davis Park. And I believe it was a charge to keep, that we were to share the information, just as you have in Salt Lake, about how we are brought together across difference to do great things, and why we are where we are today. I mean, as Black people, as white people, as neighbors and friends, of people of faith and not, we're in the place we are because it was meant to be, and overcoming all kinds of difficulties, but also bringing a whole lot of strength to get it done. So that's how all my family came. And I'm just amazed how many of us moved and came right back. And that's why I'm in Idaho.
Wow, Cherie. Okay, I could sit here and listen to you storytelling all day long, from home ownership, your ancestors, to this church that has clearly brought the community together, to now a museum, a Black History Museum right there in Boise. And your family played a critical role in all of those steps in preserving and making history, literally, in Idaho. Now, in what ways has that history inspired the work that you do in the community now? And can I ask you, I can imagine you may be one of very few or the only Black state legislator. I
was the first. I was the first. And when I was looking to retire a couple of years ago, there's a wonderful young man who went to college with my son for a period of time here at Boise State, who I hooked. And now he's the second Black to serve in our legislature. Is a wonderful man named Chris Mathias, an attorney and an Idaho boy that moved away and came back. And now he's a vital young man that's out there in the fight. Well, I guess one of the things that I would say is an important charge to keep for anyone in any place you go. I bet your parents instilled it into you that you have work to do. And if there's work to be done, and it's not like some esoteric, I'm the one that's going to bear the cross. It's not that at all. But I mean, one of the things my grandmother used to say, what if tomorrow came today? What if tomorrow came today? What would you have left undone? What would you like to do? What would you want your children to say about you? What kind of a way would you have made for another? And I think that's kind of the whole big thing. It's not about the big me and the little you. It's about the we. It's the we. And Mr. Anderson, when he opened, he talked about it's not just one culture, it's our culture, it's community, and how do we build community, and what does it look like? We do better when we have a broad breadth of people from different backgrounds, different experiences. We don't make change if we're a monolith. It doesn't happen. Wow. So I just
love that so much.
I love it very much. What do I need? What do I want? What talents, skills, and a lot of times I didn't know I had the talent, so you had to show up. And then when you show up, you step up. Am I lying? Somebody say amen. Amen.
Amen.
We have to do it. And when there is a need, we do that. I don't know that there were opportunities that I thought were out there. I've worked in so many corporations, almost every major corporation in our city, and I'm glad to do that. I've served on lots of boards, and with founding my coaching business, again, it was like, what is my purpose? Do I have a vision? Am I working toward it? What gifts do I have to give, and how much do I have to learn? Lots, lots.
Yes, well, you are clearly planting and cultivating seeds out there in Boise, and the community is benefiting from it. And thank you so much for being so intentional about succession planning in leadership positions. That is so important as well to carry on that work. So thanks. It's such an honor to have you as usual, Cherie. So I'm going to jump to Malijah. Now, you are the director of the Black Cultural Center at the University of Utah that was founded in, well, this program was founded in 2019. Also, well, congratulations on your 4-year anniversary. I also want to note today is the University of Utah's birthday, celebrating 173 years in education, founded literally on February 28th, 1850. Let's hear it for the U. I'm also a proud alumni of the U as well. The U is actually older than Zions Bank. Can you imagine that? Opening its doors in 1850, that's 23 years before Zions Bank opened its doors in 1873. The University of Utah is also the oldest state university west of the Missouri River. And we're just thrilled to have you here with us today, Malijah. And before we dive into conversation with you, can you explain the backdrop behind you?
Yes. First of all, thank you so much for having me. As far as in the background is actually the branding mark for the center that we use, and it's used in Africana studies across the country. It is the Sankofa bird. That is a marking from the Akan tribe in Ghana. And usually the translation we have used is that to go forth and go back into the past as you go forward. But the little translation of the Sankofa bird is, it is not taboo to fetch what is at risk of being left behind. And so with that, we try to remember as we go forward and everything that we do here in the Black Cultural Center, those that graduate, those that leave the institution, or those who come to the institution, that we remember all of those that have came before us, that have contributed to the success and the founding of the center. But also those in the future. Yeah.
Wow, I love that so much. Go fetch. Such a beautiful way to commemorate education, right? Go out into the world and gather. And since you're representing the University of Utah, can you share with us the history of Black history at the University of Utah and what inspired the creation of the Black Cultural Center?
Yes, good question. So we have been this is great timing because we've been trying to dig Black history here at the University of Utah. Right now, we have landed on the first Black student to attend the University of Utah. Was actually in 1960. His name was Bill McGill. He played for the basketball team here at the University of Utah. We've had several folks, prominent folks that attended the U that were Black, and also contributed to some really interesting research around Black history. One of those folks being Dr. Ronald Coleman, which was one of the founders of our Africana Studies department here at the University of Utah. We have folks like Dr. William Smith that coined the national term racial battle fatigue. We have folks, several huge history here of Blackness at the University of Utah. As far as in how the Black Cultural Center kind of came into place, actually started about 25 years ago with a woman named Dr. Fesha Adams Bell. She was the first AVP of diversity here at the University of Utah, and really started a number of different things here, whether it be Women's Week here at the University of Utah, MLK Week, as well as initial conversations around Black History Month here at the University of Utah, and was really a foundational piece. She also began talks of starting a Black Cultural Center about 25 years ago. But in 2015, we've had folks from our Black Student Union, folks from our Black Graduate Students Association, as well as folks from our Black Faculty and Staff Association and several community folks coming together and wanting a space here at the University of Utah that really focuses on belonging of the African diaspora and those that belong to it, and the shaping and how we shape that identity of Blackness here at the University of Utah. And so in 2015, there were the continuation of talks. And then in 2017, it was granted. And then in 2019, we opened our centers officially on February 26, 2019.
Wow, so beautiful. I'm a proud alumni of the University of Utah. And so some of the names that you are reciting there, I personally know and have had the honor of learning from and engaging with. And it's so interesting to see all the different touch points, all the conversations that have contributed to what is now, I would say, the home to so many of our Black students at the University of Utah. And you have created that space for them. And on that note, this is an inaugural role. So what has that meant to you serving in this inaugural role? And in what ways have you been able to mold and shape the center to honor the values of the institution while making it current and relevant for the next generation?
Absolutely. So I will say this will actually be my 10th year in Black Cultural Center work overall. And so I'm excited about that. And kind of the overall mission that I've kind of carried with me over numerous roles in being in Black Cultural Center work at various institutions is that I would like the Black Cultural Center here at the University of Utah to be a cultural conduit. And what a cultural conduit means is essentially that we bridge the gaps between belonging and development of our faculty, staff, students, and the larger community here in Salt Lake City, in Utah, and in the region in itself. But then on top of that, we focus on intersectionality. There are issues, there's disparities, there are blessings that have been bestowed upon those that identify as Black men, those that identify as Black women, those that identify as Black and queer, those that identify as non-binary, and several other aspects of that as well. But each one of those things contribute to the Black identity, as well as those that are from outside of the United States, rather it be from our Caribbean nations, rather it be from those identify as Afro-Latinx, as well as from the continent or motherland. And so we really want to promote that identity development and intersectionality on how do we shape Blackness here at the University of Utah, in that Black is not a monolith, and how we shape that as well. The other focus in which we try to take here at the University of Utah Black Cultural Center is really a focus on belonging, as I stated, as being a cultural conduit. And we have kind of domains that I really try to pin hold on. But first, we really try to focus on social belonging. We understand that students attend college to get an education, to go out into the workforce, to be productive citizens that are doing amazing things in our community. But they also need a social aspect of that as well. They need to be able to connect with their community. They need to be able to connect with each other, with faculty and staff, and bridge community relations. And so how do we do that? We do that by preparing them with social belonging. We also focus on academic belonging through a number of programs. One of those being one of our programs called Operation Success, which is Students United to Create Cultural and Educational Success Stories. And with that, we provide scholarships to students and really crafting and developing students to create either a business plan or a project proposal addressing a need in the Black community, rather be here locally, nationally, or globally. And so we really focus on that academic belonging, and then personal development with that as well. And then lastly, post-graduation. I'm a stickler as far as in this aspect that I would like every Black student that attends the University of Utah, when they graduate, that they contribute and they stay in the state of Utah. And what does that look like as far as in the development of our young Black professionals as they graduate from college? And they work for places like Zions Bank or for other companies here in the Valley, as well as this entire state. And so how do we retain Black, young Black professionals is a key component that I would like to hone in on as well from the Black Cultural Center. Yeah.
Wow, and that is such a key piece of building our economy here as well, Malaysia. I love the term that you've been using, cultural conduit. So many of us sit at the center of intersectionality, and that needs to be an integral part of all the diversity and inclusion work that we do. Also want to note that the University of Utah set up an HBCU Impact Program where we host HBCU students here for summer internship programs. Zions is a proud corporate partner in that program. And I love just hearing you clearly state that you're committed to finding opportunities, professional opportunities for students and interns right here in Utah's economy. So thank you so much for your commitment to that work. It is very much greatly appreciated and highly valued by your community partners here in Utah. Dion Henderson, my dear friend, you're here representing Black-owned businesses here in Utah. And I also want to note, publicly acknowledge your partner, Marcus Jones, who is a dear, close, and friend of mine, and I think everybody else here, who is the other partner in, he and I went to undergrad together at the U. He was originally scheduled to join us today, but due to the popularity, obviously, of Miss Essie's Barbecue during Black History Month, Marcus is busy feeding our community right now. And so he is just swamped with orders. We want to just acknowledge him and also acknowledge of all the other small business owners in our community who are unavailable to join conversations like this one today because they are holding down the fort, keeping the doors open for their employees and their clients. As you all know, small businesses are the backbone of Utah and Idaho's economies. So we want to make sure that we acknowledge their valuable contributions that make platforms like our community speaker series possible. So just wanted to put that out there. We hear you, we see you, and we appreciate you, Marcus Jones. I also want to note Dion is one of the most innovative, strategic, and intentional business leaders I have ever known. He and I both hail from Washington, D.C. And so we both bring experience doing business in D.C. and in the state of Utah. And it kind of goes without saying, but the culture and manner in which we do business there on the East Coast and how we do business here in Utah can be very different. But Dion is one of those savvy business leaders who knows how to navigate the economic landscape of both areas and sees the value Utah has to offer. So as we dive into conversation with you, can you share a little bit more about that with us? What is it that you see in Utah?
Yes, absolutely. As I was sitting there and I'm having this conversation, to be quite honest with you, I was so proud of the representation that we have here. Coming from Washington, D.C., there is a cultural norm that helps build self-esteem because everywhere I look, there are people like me in higher and equal positions. And so you're always looking to attain because the normalcy is, why can't I? This is where I'm at. Well, what are you doing? And in this group that we're sitting here talking about, from Maui to Sherry to Malaysia, to be able to talk about Black history, to talk about, Black family, and to be able to talk about entrepreneurship in a circle of people who are doing it, who are confident about it, and who are resolute in where they're at, and they're educating those that are watching it. It's such an honor. It's refreshing because it's unique to Utah. It's not something that you find everywhere. And so just let me say that one, it is an honor to have this. Zions Bank, great job. Sulain, great job for putting this group together so that we can provide and have this kind of conversation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for that.
Absolutely.
Also recognize, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, just want to recognize, since you are representing Miss Essie's Barbecue, congratulations on celebrating your 20th year in business. That is a huge deal. Big props to you. And we are proud to call Miss Essie's a client of ours here at Zions Bank. Tell us the story and history of Miss Essie's Southern Barbecue. How did it all get started? Who is Miss Essie and what has kept you in business for 20 years?
So Miss Essie's, let me go back to Marcus Jones and Mr. Manuel Jones, which is his father. Miss Essie's Southern Barbecue is a company that was born in Little Rock, Arkansas. That is where the company was started, and Miss Essie's was born. She started by baking, biscuits, right? And then that turned into her cooking barbecue on Sunday evening meals. And that just became a staple in the community. It goes back to all of the history that we were talking about, where a lot of our culture exists around the table and around family and around eating. And Miss Essie's in her community represented that kitchen table where people went to be fed and to embrace and talk and share and learn. And so that culture is something that Marcus Jones' father, brought to Arizona with him and then taught to his son. And it's been something that I have watched since literally me and Marcus have been 15 years old and best friends. I've watched him share this culture. I watched his family share this culture of amazing Southern food with people for years. And it just so happens that Marcus knew that I owned restaurants and that I was an entrepreneur myself. And at a certain point in around 2004, he gave me a call and he said, "Hey, Dion, I really need you to give me some advice. I need your help." And I had been watching Marcus do this and his father do this for years, and it was a no-brainer. And so from 2004 to, I would say, 2009, I was their principal investor. And then as we started gaining traction, I was like, you know what, I'll come on board. And I took an executive position as the managing partner and CEO.
Wow, we are so grateful for your investment, not just in the business, but in our community. I joke with you all the time because I see you here in Utah. I'm like, are you registered to vote here? Because your presence in Utah is definitely felt and greatly appreciated. And just kind of thinking about running a small business here in the state of Utah during the pandemic, many small businesses struggled to keep their doors open. What made the difference for Miss Essie's Southern Barbecue in weathering that storm?
Yes, and weathering that storm, Miss Essie's has had a lot of transition in this business. We've grown a lot, from being in retail, from being in wholesale, to even the development of our products. And one of the things that took place during the pandemic, and Marcus has just been amazing with this, is catering slowed down, production slowed down, being able to get goods and your commodities, that slowed down. And so one of the things that we sat back and Marcus was like, well, we got to feed these families. And I used to work at Costco. And so we started brainstorming, and I was seeing all of these, feeding the frontline workers. And so we came up with a marketing plan. We restructured our kitchen. We used the capital that we had to buy family-sized serving, and we started marketing to these frontline workers and to these organizations like Costco that was still serving the community. And what we did was we opened our kitchen and our warehouse to be able to do curbside family meals. And so corporate companies would order for lunch for their folks, and families would order lunch. I mean, there was such an amazing transition in the culture in America, from families sitting down for the first time, and having dinners. And we were part of providing that, as well as providing food for our frontline workers. And that's kind of how we got through the pandemic, was providing those family style meals.
Oh my gosh, that is so beautiful. Feeding families. That is how you survived the pandemic. And I always see that as one of the greatest blessings from the pandemic, right? How often do we have time to sit down and have dinner with our families? Not too often. But if you are stuck at home, that becomes like a frequent thing. And we use that term, seat at the table, sitting at the table, so often. It goes back to having meals with family. So what a beautiful story, Kate. Most important question, what is your favorite thing on the menu?
Marcus makes an amazing tri-tip. That guy is awesome. But I would say that
Agreed.
biscuit, and we actually have a chili verde that he makes.
That's right.
When I'm in town, Marcus will be like, Dion, if you're in that kitchen, I swear, you better not. Because I come in and it's just so overpowering, and it's such good food. So I mean, there's a lot that I enjoy, and it's been a really great journey watching Marcus and watching this company transition into what it is today.
Agreed. I've enjoyed many meals from Miss Essie's Southern Barbecue. And it's the type of meal that makes me, I don't know, just want to take a nap afterwards. That means it was really good. Really good. So such an honor to have you here in our community, continuing to feed families in more ways than one. Jumping to Cleopatra Balfour. Cleopatra is my friend, dear friend, and sister in community. Thank you so much for being here. I know you're always managing multiple community projects, programs, and events. So we are honored that you were able to make time for us here today.
Thank you for
and
having
your
me.
Thanks so much, sis. You and your family have been a pillar in Utah's community for decades. And I want to talk about your new role at Salt Lake County, but want to first highlight the work you've been doing in the community for years, particularly serving minority-owned businesses. You've been the mastermind behind so many community events, from numerous activations through the Utah Arts Alliance, a Black History Museum, Entrepreneurship Week, Salt Lake Juneteenth, and the All-Star Bazaar showcasing Black-owned businesses during All-Star Weekend. So tell us more about the work that you have done to open opportunities for Black-owned businesses to grow and thrive here in Utah.
Thank you. So I think you mentioned that small businesses are the backbone of Idaho and Utah, but in reality, small businesses are really the backbone of the entire nation. And for me, a lot of the work that motivates me and drives me is bringing equity and economic opportunity, which really comes from making sure that our communities have access to be able to build things like small businesses. My background is in business development, and during the pandemic, I particularly saw that a lot of our small businesses, particularly our minority-owned businesses, were not receiving access in an equitable manner. So the businesses that were hit hardest were our Black-owned businesses. They were the ones that the financial strains were shutting their doors, that were not receiving access to funding. They did not have the quick turnaround to be able to take advantage of those PPP loans and the other grants and resources that came quickly available. One of the things that you can see that hit them the most is that their finances were not in order so that they could be prepared, or they did not have the ability to pivot as quickly. So with that being my background, I decided that that was something that I could invest into my community, is to be able to center economic opportunity and equity for our Black businesses here in Utah. So that is what spurred me to do a lot of the work that I do now in bringing about those Black-owned business expos, making sure that those are centered, even within our community celebrations, making sure that economic opportunity is centered for both our businesses and our artists. So that's what motivates me, that's what drives me, and that is what brings about a lot of the work that you see that I invest in the community here.
Wow, truly remarkable work, Cleopatra, in sustaining and growing the Black business community in particular. And I want to shift gears here and circle back around to everyone to talk about ways in which each of you and your organizations are investing in our future. And I want to start with Cleopatra, talking about your new role at Salt Lake County. Congratulations, by the way. Tell us more about the history of the program that you are now managing and how the county is leveraging government resources to invest in minority-owned businesses.
So I'm really excited about this role at the county because it is something, like I said, I'm passionate about, is equity and economic opportunity. So Salt Lake County during the pandemic applied for some funding for pandemic recovery. And one of the things that they centered was making sure that our minority businesses had access in our small businesses here in the county. So they centered our partnerships with community organizations that would do outreach to these businesses and give them information on how they could access these emergency services. And that emergency response actually received awards across the country, but the county made sure that they wanted to have this program be sustainable. So they applied for continual funding, and we now have additional funding that goes through 2026 that allows us to continue those partnerships and also even build the program. So we are continuing with our community organizations and having outreach partners to our diverse and minority communities here in the Salt Lake Valley. And then also we've brought in community service providers as partners. So we've partnered with Westminster College for accounting services, with Salt Lake Community College for business development consulting, and a number of other service providers so that our diverse businesses can receive access. It's going to be something that is going to make a difference for these businesses, especially as they're still recovering from the pandemic. I know a lot of us think that's long gone, but for the businesses that were impacted, that is a long-term thing that they're going to be facing for years to come. So making sure that they receive continual resources is very important, because for some of us, we can say that we've moved on, but those businesses that have been adversely impacted, especially Black businesses, because they were hit the hardest by the pandemic. This is not something that they're going to get through immediately. So we have to build sustainable programming that gives them continual access. And that's why I think the county's program is important, because they are intentional and in their commitment to this economic opportunity and bringing equity to that, and not just saying, okay, pandemic's over, let's move on. But how do we make sure that this is continual and consistent and tangible for our businesses that do not have access?
You nailed it, Cleopatra. I hope every small business, minority-owned business is listening right now. And to get more information about resources and how they can tap into these, where should they go?
So you can visit the Salt Lake County website, so slco.org, and search for economic development. And it's the Center of Opportunity Partnership program that is housing this program. So we, like I said, we do have resources and funding and services that goes until 2026. And then we're looking at bringing on new partnerships so that we can continue this program to make sure that it's a pillar within our minority communities here in Utah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And lightning round about visions, how we're each investing in our community. Dion, as you celebrate your 20th year in business at Miss Essie's Southern Barbecue, what is the vision and strategic plan for the next 20 years?
So with Miss Essie's right now, we are focused on three things. We are separating from Miss Essie's Southern Barbecue, we are establishing and separating our catering business as its own entity. We are expanding our retail to include probably 12 new SKUs, from barbecue sauces to new rubs, as well as meat products. You will start to see us in consumer goods, frozen stores, gas stations, and what have you. And then I think the most rewarding aspect is that Utah has been a very big part of helping Miss Essie's grow. There's been, from churches to banks to, like Zion, to people. We are finally in a place where we are able to give back more than we need to receive. In fact, it's not about receiving on our end, it's about giving back. So, we are connected with a lot of organizations, and for the next 20 years, we'll continue to focus on building and expanding business and going national with Miss Essie's. And then also too, we're focused on establishing a nonprofit that will contribute in job workforce training for reentry citizens, for various different demographics, as well as helping people and minorities understand the dynamics of manufacturing and distribution, production, because we are one of the only minority-owned companies that has a facility that's doing manufacturing and distribution that's Black in our industry. And so we want to teach people what that looks like, as well as start working with people to, for a very long time was a pescatarian, in which I just ate, vegetables and plant-based diet and fish. Well, you have the meat eater and this concept of someone that is plant-based, and we still are able to thrive in a meat-based industry. And so part of our menu and part of our marketing ploy as we go into 2014 is to know Marcus and I and how we coexist in a barbecue meat, meat heavy industry, but our sauces, you can eat it if you're vegan. Our rubs, you can eat it if you're vegan, as well as meat. So it's kind of changing the face of our business, as well as being very ingrained. And then lastly, in 2024, we will focus on the restaurant for Miss Essie's. Marcus is at that point where he has mastered the ability to scale. It's really good food. And I think that because I have my restaurants in Washington, D.C., that is a network of resources I want to bring to Salt Lake City, Utah with Marcus.
Oh my gosh, can you invite me to the grand opening? Because I am there. with my bib. Thank you so much for sharing that brilliant business strategy. And I love seeing so many business strategies integrating social impact components. That I believe really is the key to sustainability. Let me jump to Malaysia. I know you've shared a number of programs and initiatives that you're running through the Black Cultural Center, but are there other ways in which you are intentionally investing in the next generation?
Yes, great question. So we just like Dion stated, we also have, I would say, work in threes as well in some aspects. And so we have three kind of flagship programs that we have in the center. The first one, as I stated a little bit earlier, was Operation Success. Again, that is giving scholarships to students and having them go through a year-long leadership boot camp, really designing and having them design either a business plan or a project proposal addressing a need in the Black community here nationally, globally, or locally. Our next program is our Male Success Initiative, and that is focused on the retention of really men of color at the college campus. And this is a statistic that I hate to kind of share, but it's something that we have to, in that the retention of men of color, particularly Black Pacific Islander, as well as Native men, are terrible. That is here at the University of Utah, but also nationally. And so we were trying to focus on the retention rates. And so we have a program called the Male Success Initiative that we work, that it's housed in the Black Cultural Center, but we also work with our American Human Resource Center, as well as our Center for Equity and Student Belonging, on really creating programs and retreats and a number of different things geared toward the retention of men of color. And then lastly, we have our Generation Next, which is building Black professionals of tomorrow. It is a program that we're launching actually this fall. And with that is designed at really shaping the next generation of, again, like I stated earlier, the next generation of Black professionals. And how we do that is by, one, connecting businesses, both Fortune 500 companies all the way to the mom and pop shops, places like Necessities, to students, connecting them and having them learn about the different aspects of business. But then on top of that, that they can not only either be a working corporate, but they can also either be an entrepreneur or other aspects of that as well. And then the other component is to really focus on having our students outside of their major really focus on side hustles. So we may have an engineering student. How do we make sure, and they're really good at graphic design. How do we, or such as myself, voiceover work, right? How do we make sure that that student can focus on their side hustle while they're in college, that also has their major? So they may be an engineering major, but they have these side hustles to really be a well-rounded student and a well-rounded professional. So when they graduate and have that postgraduate success, that they've already had 4 or 5 years of actually having their own business, or rather be graphic design or social media engagement or whichever they partake in, but have that experience on top of their major as well. But yeah, that is what we're working on.
Thank you so much. So many intentional investments there. Sure to provide, I mean, so many success stories I can see coming out of this. Thank you so much for those. Cherie, tell us more about your vision for the future of Sojourner coaching, and in what ways do you hope to inspire future generations to invest in themselves and in their communities? Oh, you're on mute. Oh, okay, we lost Cherie. Let's jump up to Molly. You're also a talented music director, producer, performing, and recording artist. We're all hoping you would be willing to offer an impromptu vocal performance for us here today. Any requests for Molly on the spot as we close out? Listen now. Okay, we could reserve that for another community speaker series, maybe a concert featuring Molly Bonner. You're so humble, so humble. Okay, we would actually need to reserve the entire hour for that. But talk to us about your nonprofit Lift Up Voices and your plans to grow its presence here in Utah. And Cherie, I'll come back to you.
I appreciate you asking about Lift Up Voices because so Lift Up Voices is my nonprofit that I've had for about 8 years, but I brought it to Utah about 3 years ago through the film. His name is Green Flake, and because I make my films through my nonprofit, and with the Green Flake, you know, what was fascinating about doing that project is we hired more people of color in our film, our small independent film, than all the films combined that year. You know, we had a Black director and a Israeli cinematographer and a Black woman who was the executive producer. So we want to continue giving people an opportunity to be in positions that they haven't been in before. And what we do with the Voices is we offer a mentorship program and also an apprenticeship program to where they're able to learn some of these skills that we teach in music and in film. So they're going to learn how to do some cinematography, composing, editing, writing, directing, those skills. And we focus on disadvantaged youth and those who are living with disabilities. And so especially post pandemic, there's so many of these young students, young kids really, who are in a terrible trajectory. And we're trying to change that, so that their path is not to homelessness or incarceration, but they are going to be a contributing member to society, having a skill in the arts. So whether it is, like I said, some of the things, directing and whatever else, and even genealogy. So we're doing that as well, so they can learn how to find their family history and tell those stories. So Lift Up Voices is going to be a big part of helping the younger generation have a voice and changing the culture of this next rising generation.
Fantastic. I look forward to learning more about that. Such mindful and intentional investing here. Cherie, let's jump back to you for a couple minutes, and I want to bring Scott back in to wrap us up and offer some closing remarks. So, Cherie.
Just quickly, I'd say I think the important thing that I hear through everybody on this call is to honor the past and endow the future, and that's what's happening. And that just gives me so much joy and enthusiasm. And I can remember when I was young, the difference being unique outside mainstream dominant culture, it was a deficit. But now that we know that the difference can often be our competitive advantage, they remember we were there, they remember what we said, they remember how we acted and how we approached, and that our uniqueness can be an unbelievable value. Improvisation, innovation, and impeccable business practice all come together under each and every one of these endeavors. And I'm just knocked out. And that's the stuff that I take with me, whether it's music or the legislature or my coaching business. I think I really value our people and the way we approach the world and how we partner with others across difference.
Beautiful. So beautiful. Thank you so much, all of you, for being here. I want to bring Scott back into the conversation to share some exciting news of making Black history right here in the Beehive State. So I'm going to give Scott a couple of minutes, and then I'll wrap things up. Scott, go ahead.
Well, I first want to thank our panel for sharing with us their stories and their perspective, but more importantly, for adding to our culture and our economy and improving our neighborhood. So thank you so much for what you do and the example you set for all of us. I'm excited to say, as Sulang mentioned, that while we celebrate Black History Month this month, we are actually celebrating a historic event in Utah. It was announced in the Wall Street Journal, and you may have seen it, that a Black-owned bank will be established here in Utah. It will be led by Ashley Bell, a White House policy advisor, and Dr. Bernice King, the daughter of the late Reverend Martin Luther King. And I want to welcome them to Utah. I want to welcome them to the banking community. Our economy will benefit from them. Our small businesses will benefit having them here, and our consumers will benefit. So we are excited to have you join us in Utah as a bank, and new business, and we welcome you. But thanks again to our panel for being with us today. It has been just a fabulous event. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Scott. You're welcome. Just spirit and all of that is really, it just means so much to all of us here and to our community. I want to thank each of our guests for taking the time to join our conversation today. One voice, one story, one conversation, can make the difference. Honoring our history and investing in our future begins with us. It begins with me. It begins with Scott, Mally, Cherie, Malijah, Dion, Cleopatra, and it begins with you. Honoring our history, it starts with all of us, and we encourage everyone who tuned in today to take what you've learned and continue the conversation in your homes, with your teams, and in the communities that we serve. This is how we will together set in motion a social and cultural shift that will lead to economic inclusion, prosperity, and growth. Thank you again for joining us today. Our next community speaker series will be in honor of Women's History Month on March 30th from noon to 1 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. We will feature women leaders who will share stories of women making history and investing in our future in our community. All of the community speaker series are open to our entire community free of charge, but registration is required. So please share with your friends, your networks, and please mark your calendars. Be on the lookout for the invite. Until then, we wish you a wonderful rest of your day, and we look forward to seeing you in the future.